Hello and welcome to the Bucket Lister podcast. Join your host Keith Crockford along with special guests who have travelled the world, here to share stories of their adventures and plenty of inspo to add to your bucket list. Now, let's get into today's episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. I am your host, Keith Crockford, and today I am chatting with Richard Woods. Hello, Richard.
Hi, Keith. How you doing?
Very well, thank you. Now, some of you might recognise Richard's voice because, Richard, you were actually on The Apprentice, weren't you?
Yes, for my sins. 2015, so a little bit of a while ago now. But yeah, I found myself filling in an application form after my wife decided to be listening to it one day. You know, that and I walked in going, what a bunch of arrogant, whatchamacallits. You know, I could do so much better than them. And she said, well, go on then. If you think you're so clever, go and apply. And lo and behold, I was like, well, I will do. And before I know it, I'm getting picked up by a blacked out Mercedes and off I go to spend 3 months running around London after Lord Sugar doing God knows what silly tasks. And, found my way all the way through to the end, which was useful.
Yeah, it's really interesting because I had exactly the same conversation with my wife. I think it was 2015. It was your series, and I applied to go on The Apprentice, and I did the first set of interviews, and then I got recalled to go and do the second ones. And then my operations manager at the time had just handed his notice in, and I made the decision that I couldn't leave the business and go off for 3 months and do what you had just done. So I didn't follow the process any further. But interestingly, the Bucket List Company was the business I was going to put to Lord Sugar had I got through and gone through to the next stage. So, so it's.
Well, he missed out.
He missed out. Yeah, exactly that. I got to keep it all for myself. So that's fine.
It is an amazing process, and going through those different interviews, even doing those interview stages is an experience. You know, did you actually go into London to go do the actual first set? Yeah. So you kind of go to Tottenham Court Road, you come around the corner, and you think. So for me, I thought, well, I'll wear the kind of tie with the matching hanky with the matching socks, and that will make me stand out. And I turn the corner, and there's like this whole long line, like on X Factor, full of people wearing matching tie hanky combos, and I'm thinking, oh god, this is going to be. I've got to do something more than that to stand out.
and you got through to the final, didn't you?
Yeah, so I got the bronze medal. Essentially, if I want to kind of award myself anything, but ultimately I just got fired in the latter stages. I think that's the best way to think about it. But I managed to do the interviews. The interviews are amazing. So it's kind of the most watched part of The Apprentice. And we had this whole floor on the Littman building, which is the walkie-talkie in London. And it was completely empty. Obviously, the company that was in there hadn't moved in yet. And you just had this one desk and this vista of London skyline. And it was a really sunny day. And there's just Claude Littner or one of the other people that are interviewing you, because you do 4 interviews, just sitting at the one desk, and all these cameras are just around you, and you're just in this heat box. And just for that moment to sit there and have your heart rate go through the roof like it would do was just worth it, because it's just I can see it now, and it's just a very unique experience. And obviously only 5 people a year get to play and do that bit.
And
that was fun. Yeah.
Amazing. And then we met a couple of years later, actually, at a business event in Birmingham. And then that's kind of where we got to know each other. And then during COVID, you sent me a message on Facebook, and we had a chat over the phone because you had Island Peak on your bucket list. And then you rang me up to actually ask me if you felt you wanted to take your dad on and have this experience with your dad. And actually, we did a podcast with your dad a few weeks ago talking about the North and South Pole, which was a really great episode to do. And I really enjoyed chatting to your dad about that one. But I remember that conversation so well, where, you're like, he's going to be late 60s by the time we get to go. Do you think, I want him to come along? Do you think he'll do it? And I'm like, yeah, he seems like, the sort of bloke he would definitely be up for doing Island Peak and achieving it. So off you both went last year and went to Island Peak.
Yeah, I'd recommend anybody thinking about it. So ultimately, I wanted to go to Everest Base Camp. That was the kind of initial line of inquiry, and I didn't actually know much about anything else. But your website will sort of said, well, you could also, whilst you're there, summit something, because obviously you spend best part of sort of 12 days getting to the start of a journey, which is getting to the base, which is amazing. But the idea of then going and actually climbing a thing and reaching a peak just off the side of Everest was just too exciting to kind of let it go by. But obviously we hadn't done any ice climbing, and obviously everybody listened to Dad's episode because I listened to the whole thing. I was fixed, and I've heard that story God knows how many times around the dinner table, but it was brilliant. But he's gone across poles and across ice with sled and stuff, but actually climbing up with picks and ropes and all the rest of it, we hadn't done before. And so that was, again, another thing that was really, really exciting. And, when you said that you reckon we'd be all good to go, then we did it. We booked it. We were off to the races from then on out.
And I think that's a really important thing as well is, a lot of people do think that with Everest Base Camp, like, you're trekking to get to the bottom of something, whereas if you do Kilimanjaro or Mount Toubkal or any other mountain, you've got a finite endpoint where you've achieved what you set out to achieve. You have stood on the top. Whereas, like with Everest Base Camp, yes, it's iconic to get there and there is an end point. But for a lot of people, that is the start point of the journey and you're only actually getting to the start point. So Island Peak does give you that extra thing of actually saying, do you know what? I've stood on top of something. I've completed this climb.
Yeah, but I mean, for anybody kind of thinking they must do that, I would say you just don't need to. I mean, I remember, I think it was Namche where we first got, like when we were starting to go up the trek, and then suddenly these huge mountains start to appear through the clouds. And Everest then actually in itself appeared. And just even being able to have the gaze on the world's largest mountain you're actually, it takes your breath away. You're almost awestruck by it. So just gazing at it in 3D, not on a picture, is just amazing. But not just that, walking along next to Amadabla, and it's just an amazing mountain, and seeing that and staying in these different places. I mean, just the journey is amazing in itself. So I would never, staying in Tenenbosch with the monastery on top of the hill overlooking things, which the monastery that Hilary himself helped to create or kind of recreate after a big fire. Actually, I think it was already there before Hilary, but to regenerate that monastery after a fire that they had there. It's just amazing, most thick with history, authentic route up the mountain and the people, and the necessity to even worry about challenging there. It's a challenge in itself. So the fact that Island Peak is a nice little clamp on to it, and when I say little and clamp on, I mean that in its biggest tongue in cheek, because
6,200 meter clamp on, like
it's a beast. But yeah, so anybody don't feel like anybody would be obliged. And of course the trip that we're on, which was beautiful, was two groups that came together for the first part. So an Everest Base Camp group and an Island Peak group. So everybody was going to achieve Everest Base Camp together, and then Island Peak would go off and do Island Peak and come back, which was great because it just meant that different kind of fitness levels or climbing kind of ambitions all rolled into one, but everybody was there stretching themselves. And if at any point anybody kind of wanted to go, well, actually, I'm not quite going to do the Island Peak bit or whatever, you always have that kind of co-group. So I know that's not always the case that you have two sets of groups going together, but it just made a really fantastic experience in the tea houses in the evenings, and the rich tapestry of backgrounds and personalities that kind of filtered through our group was wonderful. So really, 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 even talking about you now, I'm like, fond memories.
and I think that's the lovely thing about group travel, isn't it? When you do travel with a group, is the fact that, obviously Everest Base Camp is quite a busy trail anyway. You're never going to get it to yourself. So, you are always going to be walking around other people and actually experiencing that with other people, and just having other people to talk to hear about their life stories. I know our guides came back and were talking about your dad, and that's where the idea of that podcast came from, because they were just like, we just spent hours listening to him talk about all the things he's experienced, and it just makes the days go quicker, doesn't it? And the trekking just seem so much easier sometimes.
Yeah, well, you definitely don't want the days to go quicker. That's the point. You want them to slow down. But it's fantastic, and of course, a lot of people said that to us. So we were a little bit kind of, oh, is it going to be really busy? I hear all these kind of stories about how you're getting lots of people on the trek, and I think something like 40,000 people do it each year. We didn't experience that. Genuinely was not as busy as we expected. If even to use the word busy in the sentence, it wasn't a case of that. Every now and again, you'd find yourself in the evening in a tea house with maybe another 2 or 3 groups. So the actual room was busy to have food catered for, but that wasn't every tea house, and it was also part of it, to kind of fill in all in the networking and chatting and sharing stories in the evenings. It was great. So I don't think it is. Maybe that's just my expectations, and maybe when people are going to do it year in, year out, like you guys, you might see it being busier. But as a punter coming from the outside, I didn't find it was that busy. So
yeah, I think you were very lucky, because you actually had a very bad weather window prior to, well, not prior to, during when you were due to fly out. And actually there was very little air traffic. So when you actually got to start your trek, like there had been days and days, I think there was even like a week that nobody had flown into Everest Base Camp before you guys arrived. I think that was a moment of genius in terms of that as well, to make sure you had a nice quiet trail to achieve. But yeah, because you were stuck in Ramchap for a few days before you could fly out, weren't you?
Yeah, 3 nights, which is, when you're trying to create a daily vlog, it's very difficult to come up with the next narrative of another blooming day in Ramchap. But it was fun, and actually it does. Sometimes it's quite nice to have these decompression days where you're there, you're waiting for a weather window, you get up super early, try and get there. It didn't quite happen, so then we came back, and actually during the time that there was a festival, a local festival, religious festival. It was like a day off for family day, and as a group, a few of the Nepalese guides that were with us actually did a kind of ceremony within the group. And the elder of the group, which was Dad, which very long, had to give out blessings to all the group. And this was a brilliant kind of almost team building exercise, because we've only really by the time we got to Ramchab, it's like day 2 or whatever, day 3 or a little bit further in. So it's lovely to then have had the time to come together, had a bit of a fun, had a few beers. And there would happen to be a swimming pool at the place that we stayed at, which was good laugh. So we were playing, water polo for a couple of days whilst waiting for this weather window to clear, and did some little small walks as well around there, which was great to kind of get the altitude through the lungs, because although it wasn't as high as we were going, it was still pretty, the pool's just high. So just wherever you are, it always feels a little bit thinner, the air. So it was good. It was fine. A little bit of adversity at the start of a trip never harms the soul too much.
And I think that's one advantage of going with a group, is when you do end up, if you had booked that solo and you and your dad had gone down to Ramchap, like, how do you feel that would have differed if you had been there solo, the 2 of you together, compared to being part of a group trip and being looked after by UK leaders and our Nepalese leaders? Do you think that being part of that group made that a whole lot easier, or?
Oh yeah, I mean, it's the type of airport, like it's like something out of a catastrophe movie. So there is people trying to hustle their way to the front of queues. locals like speaking and raised voices to each other in a language you don't understand. You've then got our guys that seem to have a good relationship with the airport guys that are having little quiet words on the side, and suddenly our bags are getting put on before other people's, and like you would get swallowed up by it, and you would just sit on the side thinking this is ridiculous, and then the word gets out that there might be an aeroplane, and it goes. I remember one just went, and we were like, yeah, and then the weather window went and gone again. And there's no way you're on your own get anywhere near the first, second, 19th plane that goes out of there. And so it just doesn't happen. And it's also therefore understanding that. So we were grounded for 3 days, but we had constant communication, reassurance that this is normal. The conversation about, well, should we just drive up, which is a way of doing it. The reassurance that is a ridiculous idea. It's the worst journey you ever have in your life. You'll end up in having to do some walks through mosquito infested areas, and like just getting all of that information from people that have had to drive because there was just no weather window and had to wait because they are used to this. And then also just reassuring you to say, look, when it does happen, don't worry. They're very good at getting loads of people off the ground. And so on every front, that's just knowledge that you can't Google that. It's just like, it's chaos.
It is complete chaos. And I think, the advantage that you definitely had on your trip was the fact that you had accommodation every night, because I was hearing horror stories of people having to drive back to Kathmandu because Ramchap just doesn't have the infrastructure to have that many trekkers stuck there for a period of time. There is very little accommodation, and you managed to keep your beds probably in the nicest accommodation for 3 nights.
Yeah, and that's the point, because we're checking out each day. We leave the hotel at something like 6 a.m. or even earlier, I think, because they wanted us there and bags there at the front of the queue, so we get the first one, the weather window. But we had to do that 2 days in a row and literally get nothing. And about lunchtime, they would call it. But lunchtime, you've been awake for like 8 hours trying to sort stuff out. But they would call it and you go back to accommodation. But for the hotel's point of view, what are they doing? They're turning people away. They're not. I mean, I have no idea how that happened, but they at one point they're putting on additional tents or just popping up tents to be able to sleep on site to accommodate people of the group. And actually, Gareth and Jake were good because they took one for the team and had one of these little ramshackle tents as our guide, so we could all go back into the nice rooms in there. But it was I don't know how they do it, and I know that obviously there's your team out there, both UK team and local team, have been doing this for God knows how long, and have got some deep connections that will literally work their socks off to get you guys comfortable and get you guys sold, which was amazing actually. I mean, I genuinely think that the Nepalese people, just in their way that they are, can't do enough for you, and it's really quite humbling when they really go out on the limb for you and accommodate you.
Yeah, definitely. They do work hard for that. And I was loving your vlogs. Like, obviously, we're friends on Facebook, so I was seeing you post the Facebook updates every day, and it was so nice to see people commenting on your Facebook posts, and me just thinking, wow, that's our company that he's doing that with. Like, it was, you all looked like you were having such a lovely time on the trek up to like Tengboche, and like you were just having a party by the looks of it.
Oh, it was great, and actually, it's the characters that are on the trip as well. And I just chucking a phone in their face all the time, and to be fair, they're all game for it. It was never kind of and I'm not like tapping them, but we're just having a giggle walking up the road, and you start to get these little internal jokes and this bit of fun, and everybody kind of then starts to get used to sharing how they feel. Because you ask people where are we going today, and they say, oh, we're going to go up to Ten and Vosh, we're going to go see the monastery. Okay, and then suddenly we stop, and like one of the guides would go, "Oh, you see this? This is, wizard's beard, and it's a type of moss that actually you can, spark up and make a fire out of." And it's like, "Oh, that's cool." And by me having the camera and kind of asking those questions and getting it out, I feel like I got such an enriched experience because I was just, interviewing each person, and they were going, "Oh, well, this is what I'm looking at. This is what I'm doing."
Yeah, I love the Mickey taking of Jake and his Bear Grylls. That was. Because we take the mick out of Jake, thinking he's Bear Grylls as well. So, like, you picked up on that quite quickly.
Baby Grills.
Yeah. Yeah.
He was brilliant, but he would stop because he would just go, "Oh, which is this?" And then he would wait for me to get my camera out. I was like, "All right, Dave, we'll get the camera out." I don't know who's more vain, me or him.
Oh no, definitely Jake. Definitely Jake.
But they were so knowledgeable though. And we had so much fun doing it. And also just there's little bits that that is part of the story of going to Everest, because the whole Hillary story and the Tenzing Norgay story and the way that the kind of the Sherpa teams worked with the kind of explorer teams and that dynamic and the stories around it, and the fact that when we went up to which place has got the highest Irish bar in the world? Namche Bazaar. So we went up to Namche Bar, and the fact that there is one of the Sherpas who was still on that team who still sits in this bar, and you can go meet him, and you start to just feel part of that, because it wasn't that far away. And there's boots that hang in like some of the tea houses that are from the old explorers and old poles and ski and just stuff that you go and look at and just thinking, wow, that is real. It's not like this fake stuff you see, basically nailed to pub walls to try and make it feel authentic. It's like a real feeling. There's an atmosphere around it, and both from the exploration side, this trip, but also from the religious side. You're going past all the bells and you're spinning them for good luck, and you can't walk past things one way. You have to walk past them clockwise, and you kind of see these different little monuments. You go up and you suddenly feel really humble on this. It's a journey. It's almost a pilgrimage that you're on to get up there, and that is just the depths of the feeling for it. And the mornings add to that atmosphere, because it's got this misty kind of feel to it, because you're going through the clouds, and it just has that something. It's like almost off a horror movie sometimes. It just settles in and goes really quiet, and you just think, "Oh crikey, Yeti's going to come around the corner and take me out."
Yeah, I think my favorite view always is waking up on at Tengboche and then looking out the back of the tea house in Tengboche, and you just get that view of Amadablam and Everest. If you've got a lovely clear morning, I think that is just looking down the valley and seeing that picture there is like, it's what you imagine. It's just like a screensaver on your computer.
Yeah, exactly right. It's that view from the top there is phenomenal. Actually, funny story about that. So we all went piling out one evening. We were just having a nice kind of evening, and we had their food. And I think Gareth was sorting something out and doing the altitude testing with people. So going around the circle and testing where people's blood oxygen and stuff was. And one of the boys up there going, "Guys, Everest, I can see it. The clouds are just parted, amazing, like moon that's shining down." And we all went piling out because we hadn't seen it this close before, to go, whoa, and it's just shining, and literally the clouds had kind of done that, and in the middle of this huge mountain, and we're like, "Oh my God," and everybody's like, "It's Everest," and we're running out getting cameras. Anyway, Gareth comes rolling out, and we're all pointing this way, go, "Wow," he says, "No, Everest is over there, lad." And it's just this massive cloud, like, "Oh, right, okay." Everybody's got out the tea house to go look at a small, well, for us, it was like the biggest thing we'd ever seen, but it was literally
in terms of height,
a minnow compared to what the morning showed us, because then the clouds in the morning, boom, and there's this Goliath that's overseeing this tiny little mound that we thought was Everest, which was huge, obviously, in the light, but it wasn't insignificant compared to the actual real thing.
And then, I mean, this podcast titled "When Things Don't Go Right," and I remember the phone call very well, because I was just locking up the climbing centre down in Devon, because I wasn't out in Nepal with you guys. I was back home, and my phone, the climbing centre closes at 9:30, and as I was locking the door, my phone rang, And I looked at my phone and it said Jake on it. And I was like, right, this isn't going to be a good phone call because it's 9:30 here, but it's 2:45 in the morning where you guys are. So I answered the phone to Jake and he was like, we've got a problem. We've got one of the guests has come down and they're really not very well and we're going to have to evacuate them out. And I was like, oh, I hope it's not Dennis. And I was like, who is it? And they were like, it's Richard. And I was like, oh, okay. Right. And then we just, had the conversation and, you were in a pretty bad way and you had got to Dingboche and, you were just really struggling, weren't you?
Yeah. Even now, I'm not sure what happened because I wasn't that bad. I kind of got in a position where I was starting to feel ill, but more like just ill that you might get if you would stupidly. I think I had like some tomatoes and stuff in one of the burgers and stuff, and they just you say don't have anything after a certain height which might have local water and stuff. And so I think I was feeling not well from there anyway for a day or so, but just suddenly about 1 o'clock in the morning, I just massive pains in my chest and really struggling to breathe, and it almost come on really, really quickly. And I was trying to breathe, trying to kind of get oxygen in, and sort of woke up Dad trying to just rustle around and try and actually just fill the lungs up. And so he was trying to help me and trying to do trying to get me sitting up, etc. And it just continued this massive problem. And so I've got autoimmune disease, so I'm on blood thinning tablets. I had 3 strokes when I was 30. That's how I found out I've got this blood condition. And of course, so therefore, there's always a slight concern on how that's going to react. And so, we're starting to get really worried because if it hits the fan, it could go downhill rapidly, which happened. And then so Dad jumps out into the hallway and kind of knocks on a few doors, finds Gareth and Jake and actually a few of the guides that were with us who were excellent, and a few of the Nepalese guys, and then they got the oxygen thing out, and I'd gone below 50% oxygen, which is I don't know what a dangerous what is the dangerous level when it gets to oxygen?
Well, I mean, if we look back during COVID, if your oxygen sats went below 95, that was you were going into hospital. So, I mean, at Dingboche, we would expect people to be around the 80s at Dingboche, maybe late 70s, but certainly not anywhere near where you were. That's, dangerously low levels.
Yeah, and I could feel it because I'm just gasping for air. And do you know, the strange thing about it, Keith, as well, is that I don't even think that we've really finished the look into this. We're not really 100% sure on what happened. The suspicion is that I got a virus and actually was starting, I was starting to feel, as I said, but then it really started to come about in that evening. And so that combined with the oxygen and the air was good. But my readings were always quite strong. I got quite a slow heartbeat and it, I trained for this trip, so I felt actually really good in terms of my fitness as well. So I was bouncing around on all the actual legs in the days, and it was just caught me by complete surprise. And luckily, they had an oxygen thing there already, and they were going to put me on oxygen. They said, well, look, if he's dropping as much as he is, let's not do it yet, because if he starts hitting 40 and we're having to evacuate him at 2 o'clock in the morning, we're going to need the oxygen there. It's only a small canister that they had in there, which is good that they have them. These are tea houses, right? So they should be used to this stuff. But of course, when you're up there, the weather conditions means you're not going to get helicoptered out. Nobody's going to fly at night. You start adding it up and thinking, shit, we've got to kind of look after ourselves here and get stuff going. So it was all a bad state of affairs at that point. And ultimately, it was a case of just trying to get you into a position that's almost like a sat up fetal position with your chest open to actually get the air out. And they were testing every half an hour the oxygen level, and consistently for a number of hours in a row I was bouncing around that sort of 50 60 mark, and then and then it started to kind of work its way back up to something that was better when the day was there. But it just meant that I was snookered, and also I was just ill as well around that. So the next day I just were in the tea room, and it was just one of those horrible moments we had to say to guys that, you know, everybody's due to leave that day. And I was just, well, I just couldn't possibly even go anywhere or do anything. And it would be dangerous to try and continue to go higher if I've just reacted like that, because although we're in a nice tea house that day, within a couple of days, we're going to be, you know, in tents at the foot of, you know, the base camp for Island Peak. And that's an even worse place to be. So unfortunately, we had to make the call, pull the plug, and kind of stay where we were for a little while, and then work down to lower the altitude that day. So we kind of slept in the morning, and then worked down in the afternoon, and went to the mountain rescue base, which was literally just down across and down. So it was in
Ferrochet.
Ferrochet, yeah, exactly. I think it was something like the Yeti Mountain Rescue Place or whatever, the Nepalese mountain rescue. And
yeah, because we couldn't. We just, you know, the weather was really bad. Like, you know, we had, you know, I had spent the night on the phone. I mean, luckily you had taken the insurance out that we advised that our participants take, which always helps us out because we know the process very quickly. And, you know, it's much easier for us in the UK to be getting hold of people and trying to sort everything out than it is for the guides in country to be doing. And we just couldn't get a helicopter up because of the weather. And I remember, you know, being in constant communication and I said to Jake and Gareth, I was like, right, Gareth, you stay with Dennis and Richard, and Jake, you take the rest of the group off, and Gareth can catch you up in a, you know, we just didn't know how long at that point, did we? It was just a case of, and then that afternoon we made the call that actually your sats had gone up and you were wandering around a bit. So actually, let's try and get you down to Ferrochet, where at least there are doctors and medical equipment there, and we can try and work out and see what had actually gone wrong. Because, you know, as soon as you got in there, they fitted you up to an ECG, didn't they? And the worry at that point was whether you had actually had a heart attack, was what they were concerned about then.
Well, they found some unusual murmurs on the ECGs, so it kind of had you know, potential that might have been the case. Now that ultimately, by it transpires, it wasn't the case, and so that's where the kind of synopsis around virus and altitude comes into it, which was, you know, really well. I'm delighted from my point of view that it wasn't a heart attack, but at the same time, you know, it just goes to show how easy these things can kind of come about. And yeah, when they put the ECG on there, again, there's another level of concern because they couldn't 100% say what it was, so they had to get me to Kathmandu as quickly as possible in case there was issues. And at that height, you know, you just don't want to have any further issues. I remember when I had my strokes, I had 2 on one day and then 1 the following day. So I always remember that these things can be lasting over a period of time. And that's where, you know, I just thought, well, we've got to get into a proper hospital as soon as possible. And so they started to call the airplane, the helicopter. But again, that was important. That was, again, didn't come straight away. That was really difficult because of the weather to get another one. And the mountain rescue area was starting to fill up with people that had got issues that had been pulled off the mountain similar to us. And the team that you guys have got and the connections that they have were able to get me the first helicopter out in the first weather window and straight into Kilimanjaro, straight into Kathmandu.
A long way to fly there.
It's a long way to go. Straight into Kathmandu from there, and then into hospital, where I stayed for a couple of nights with getting tests, etc. But the lower I was going down, the better I was feeling. So there's definitely an altitude element to it. And then they had to pump me full of, you know, various medicines and a drip and all the rest of it in Kathmandu, and had the first proper hot shower, which was a good thing. Although actually, no, that's not fair, because I did in the monastery, there was one there. There's different places you can always pay to have them, but It was kind of the first one that was not inside a little shed.
Outside. And in terms of, you got tested when you came back to the UK. You went straight to the doctors then, and again, it was inconclusive of what had actually happened at that point, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, and it's frustrating, which is, as mentioned to you, that I'm going to still want to do these expeditions, but I need to kind of look and your interview that you did with the London Altitude Centre was a great interview, and I thought that was that's an interesting line of inquiry for me, just to try and look at am I more susceptible to altitude? Is the fact that I have to use blood thinners an element of that, or is it just all coincidence and I've got a bad virus and it was just a bad day at the office? And it's trying to work out, what was it? How was the issue? But it's even to this day, I think, oh damn it, I wish maybe I'd kind of settled a bit and then maybe tried to go back up. But it's a strange thing, this place in altitude, and also when the body starts telling you things, you can't go too far. That's where people get into serious problems, when they try and push themselves further than they see the signs. So I think it was the right decision made, but it does rather leave a little bit of unfinished business for us to go back and complete it one day.
And in terms of, the Nepalese government announced this month that they're changing the rules for trekking in the national parks in Nepal anyway. So as of April the 1st, so a couple of days' time, when this interview goes out on the podcast, you're going to need to go with either a local guide or a porter. So you're not going to be able to trek in the region unaccompanied anymore. But how do you feel it was having the guides with you, but also like the way we run our trips by having the British guides with us as well? How do you think that helped the situation that you were in, or didn't help? What's your opinion of that?
Oh, well, look, the local guides are brilliant, because they will get you. The porters, you barely see them, and the big bag, not the bag that you normally carry, but a lot of the other stuff and equipment and climbing stuff is just gone, and they're wonderful. It's nice to bring the Nepalese side, but if you don't have the UK guys there, you just miss this mass amount of help, support, history. The English that the guys on the ground speak, the Nepalese guys, is great, but there is story and time to be able to ask questions and to draw more out. And just the organization side, and the fact that you feel completely looked after from UK all the way through to the trip and then back to the UK again. That's why I recommend someone going with a proper tour operator with UK best guides. And then of course, when we had the problem, that's when they really kicked into their own, because they're able to know what access to what we have. Of course, the links with your company and the insurance company was brilliant, because that was all sort of taken care of, and they just stuck with us until we were rescued, and that again is testament to the quality of your team that you've got, and the ability for them to react under pressure. Because even to the point, because obviously you had got released from hospital, you probably had another 7 days before your flight home, and your dad just picked up the phone to us, and we moved your flights forward, and so you could get, you just wanted to get home at that point, didn't you? You didn't achieve what you went there to do. You didn't want to spend another 7 days in Kathmandu. You wanted to be back with your family, and that's what was sorted for you, wasn't it? Yeah, exactly right. And that's also, there's lots of moving parts involved in even moving those flights, and people on the ground. I mean, one of the guys had to go queue up at the airport to go change those flights because they weren't accepting phone calls in. So it's liaising with those local kind of entities, as well as getting your kind of flights. Getting the flight sorted was brilliant, to be able to just get home, because once you've got a problem, you get released from hospital, you want out of there ASAP. And that's what we managed to do. So we were lucky in some way.
So you said just a minute ago that it's given you unfinished business, and we've already had the conversation, that you want to go back. But And maybe next year is the year to head back to Nepal and do something, whether it'll be Island Peak again or whether it'll be something else. I know you haven't made that decision yet, but your dad's making you do another trip with him this year just to double check, isn't he?
Yeah. So we're going to do Mont Blanc. So the biggest one in Europe. The biggest one in Europe,
Western Europe.
It doesn't include Russia.
Wow, the biggest one in Europe you can currently do. That's
Exactly. It's always strange to say that Russia's part of Europe as well. It doesn't quite kind of fit with your mindset. But yeah, ultimately Mont Blanc, right? So most people will know Mont Blanc. Amazing climb, again, very technical because it's ice picks and rope. So we're going to do that one. But it's also very close to home, and so if I have another problem, that will be the last trip I do at altitude, because clearly some people aren't built for height. So I'd be gutted because, I've got other trips planned that I want to do after this one. And maybe next year for me might actually be more like a Kilimanjaro, and then go out to Nepal, because I'd like to try some of those bits. And ultimately, when I was on the trip, I was feeling great. So I was starting to think, well, I quite like to do the actual, all the big mountains around the world. Yeah, the 7 summits. Maybe without Everest as part of that, the actual big one, because I don't like the idea of those percentages in terms of returning from. I quite like my life, but the other ones seem fairly feasible and achievable. So I had at that point started to think that I'm going to start to go on a bit of a trail to go tick those ones off, which I still feel that way, hence the biggest in Europe. And then we're going to look at Kilimanjaro, and then maybe try and get back to do the Nepalese trip. But whatever happens, I'm not put off by it. I'm just cautious by it. And of course, the nice thing about it is that Dad's up for it as well. So we're going to keep on climbing.
Well, I think, as we said, as we were discussing before we started to record the podcast, a visit to the altitude centre for a couple £100 to get yourself strapped up to the machine and just get their advice and just see how your body reacts to being at altitude in that controlled environment, I think would be money well spent, I think.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt. So that's on the card. So I think it's just a process, isn't it? And maybe people should think about actually going to that altitude center before one of these trips. But none of the people that were on our trip did. And if you had asked me, I felt that I'd sat there, as feeling that one of the fittest, kind of people that were part of our group, and I'd done so much stuff beforehand in terms of climbing, in terms of UK training and further afield, that I probably would have gone, I'll be all right. And it just goes and shows that what people say about how altitude affects different people at different times, different ways, is so true. And I guess I'm probably a case study of that.
Yeah, I think the thing with the altitude center is just the fact that potentially you just get that reassurance and peace of mind that actually, they can test you to 5,500 meters. And if you get that, your body reacts okay to 5,500. Because I think when you are at altitude sometimes, and you feel a bit ill, or you get a headache, or you feel a bit sick, you're always questioning your mind, is that my body reacting badly to altitude? When it could be something completely different. Like you said, it could have been the food, it could have been a virus, it could have been anything. But people, I think, are just a bit wary, thinking, well, I've got something wrong with me and I know all about this altitude sickness, and I don't want it to be that, because if I say if I've got altitude sickness, the guides are going to turn me around and make me go back down, and so I'm going to just keep quiet. And I think if you just know and get that, your body reacts fine at 5,500 meters. It just, before you go out on the trip, you're ready, I think.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the point. And it's not just the altitude side. It's also really triple checking your kit and making sure you got the right stuff, because when you get out there, you suddenly realize that you're underprepared or underpacked stuff, or you need stuff, and you start off badly. Whereas if you've got all your stuff in the right place, you've looked over all the kit lists and stuff, and you've done the altitude stuff, it's mindset. So the rest is just pointing in the right direction and taking one foot in front of the other, and you're away. And then you can enjoy it, But if you're scrambling around thinking, have I packed the right kit, you might be in a bit of a trouble. So yeah, definitely pride and preparation, eh?
That's it. And Richard, are your vlogs still on YouTube? Are they still there?
They're still on there, and you're welcome to link to them. They'll be up there on my YouTube channel. Just kind of sharing some adventures. I look forward to adding some more trips to that little channel. It's in amongst all my work stuff. So if anybody's checking out, I do apologise in advance that there's other stuff there. But there is a lot. About I think 8 episodes, 8 or 9 episodes in there, from all the way from the UK and getting ready in Kathmandu, and the briefings through to each leg of the journey, and a daily vlog all the way up to the air evacuation, which was actually, apart from being really gutted about the trip, the most amazing helicopter ride out of the
valley,
through the valleys and into the airport. I mean, it was just mind blowing, and of course then the flight into Lucca Airport, which was just out of this world. Again, all of that is on those vlogs as well. So if you're thinking about doing the trip, it's a great one to go do. Just don't get put off by the last one, because it's just, I was just unlucky, whereas everybody else on our trip had a great time and completed it. So like all these adventures, there's always a little bit of jeopardy. Otherwise it wouldn't be called an adventure, would it?
Well, exactly that. And I think, as much as it was disappointing, you're here to live another day, and you were looked after very well. And I think that's the whole point of trying to highlight on this podcast is, it is a numbers game. Someone is, the amount of people that go trekking, someone is going to get poorly. That's just part and parcel of it. But I think, if you're well looked after and you felt safe, and which, I think you did, then that's also a bit of a tick as well, in terms of, you're there to go and have another go at it another day.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, Richard, thanks ever so much. I will put a link to your YouTube channel into the notes of this podcast. So if you want to go and check out, and there are some really funny episodes in there. I really did enjoy watching them. So Richard, thanks again for coming on, telling this story. Hopefully it will inspire some more people, and at the same time, put a few people's mind at ease of, what happens when things do go wrong. So thanks ever so much.
Pleasure.
Until next time, everyone, thank you ever so much for listening. And I'll be back next week with another episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. So until next time, goodbye.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bucket Lister podcast. Be sure to click follow to be alerted for next week's episode. For more travel inspiration, check us out at www.thebucketlistcompany.co.uk or follow us on socials. See you next time.